And that's actually how I accidentally went infinite without Ghostly Flicker even in the deck. Oh, sorry, one sec. Oh, hey, James.
Did I hear you say you went infinite?
Aren't you at the snow?
Yeah, I'm on a chairlift. It's fine. I'm multitasking.
I was just explaining that accidental Dualcaster Mage combo with Molten Echoes.
Oh, that one again. God, he goes infinite with one card and thinks he's God.
All right, I'm just in a game, man. I better get back to it.
All right, well, I gotta go eat snow anyway.
Okay, I'll catch you soon, man.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
All right, bye, man.
Yeah, catch you, man.
Have a good one, dude.
Yeah, you too, big boy.
Toodle pip.
Yep, same.
Cheerio, then.
Yeah, have good snow.
I will. You too.
Okay, bye, man.
Bye. Oh, wait, Walt, that combo works way better. Oh, he hung up.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC, helping you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. It is me, your other host, James. And already, because of that incredible long skit, we're throwing a page.
Yes, we are. That's actually done. A third of the podcast. This one's going to be exactly 6 minutes long altogether.
I mean, that wasn't actually a skit. That was just a recording of an actual phone call we had.
I'd believe it. I mean, you are basically living at the snow at the moment. For those who don't... Yeah, look, there's a bit of a running gag where James eats snow. I wasn't even there for the original, but James said it was important to him that we talk about it.
I can't even remember where the joke came from. It's just now that every time I'm at the snow, I get text messages being like, does the snow taste good? I'm like, it's frozen water.
Who even knows? It's,
no idea.
Typical of our community.
Hey, did you see in our inbox we have yet another email from the Space Commanders?
Oh, we do. So it's an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Sometimes it is time to say farewell to one of our decks.
Oh, I hate... This is a goodbye episode.
Yeah, like the phone call.
Yeah.
It's a time where we say farewell.
Cheerio.
Goodbye. Toodle pip. As you said. This is actually a sneak peek, James, at our Q&A episode, which is only one episode away now.
Finally, I can say it's next episode.
Yes.
I can finally say
Jumped
next
the gun
episode.
a bit that last time, but it's actually time now. So this is actually a question that I was already thinking about, and then a couple of our community members, specifically Aaron, asked, when should you retire a deck? Or something like that. I'm just rephrasing for clarity. And Jordan asked which decks have Walt and James disassembled. So I thought let's have a full episode about, because obviously we love building decks. Me and you are notable for having a lot of
big
decks.
Big collection.
I've got 13. I think you counted yours, and you're at...
I'm at 14 now.
14.
And I'm not sure if you remember this, but like to give an example of this, and I might even put this in the comment on our Facebook group, the photo that we took through lockdown of all of the decks we'd built on a coffee table. Do you remember that photo?
I do remember that photo. Yeah.
And when we laid them all out, it was one of those moments where we stood up and went... Okay, that's a lot of decks.
Yeah, it really put it in perspective. It was me and you, and also
my partner at the time.
Your partner at the time.
Yeah.
And I think collectively we already were probably around the 20 mark, I reckon.
Oh, easily.
And we've gotten a lot further since then. But funnily enough, also when I look at that photo, and we often both have this thing, there's a few decks in that photo that we no longer have.
There's a lot of decks in there that don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
A lot, actually. I'm really interested. I might, after this podcast, bring it up and we can have a look and see if, like, through this podcast, we'd missed a deck that we were meant to talk about. But I'll put it up in the comments on our Facebook group. And if you're not a member on our Facebook group yet and you're listening to this out in the interwebs, Greensboro Commander Community, that's where you can find us on Facebook. Just answer the few prompts when you join in and you can come play with us.
For sure. Well, look, if we are going to disassemble a deck, why would we do it? I think the short answer... that's pretty obvious, and probably what some people are going to be thinking straight away is it's not fun anymore, right? We play Commander to have fun. Sometimes our decks get to a certain way where we're not no longer having fun. And so I sort of thought, as a focus, let's try and think of the ways in which decks stop being fun for us.
Interesting, because I mean, to call back to the very first episode of this podcast and the reason why we're making this podcast, it's to make sure we're having better and more enjoyable Commander games.
Yeah.
And this is, unfortunately, as much as it pains, myself to take apart a deck or seeing you disassemble one of my favorite decks of yours, it's a necessary part of that process, and there's plenty of reasons why you would want to disassemble it. And yeah, we'll run through a bunch of different ways, and we'll talk about some examples of our own, try and answer both sides of the coins of the question here. But yeah, there's heaps of different ways, and I think the main way is, yeah, you stop enjoying it.
Yeah. And so look, I think that's going to be the core theme that's going to recur, right? Is if the deck is no longer fun. I think it's also worth mentioning that it's often, if a deck no longer becomes fun for the people you play with, that's also going to be a thing. But look, I think mostly decks can fall into one of these three categories, I think, are the main ones.
Yeah.
At least for me, that I've encountered of why I've decided to disassemble my decks. And the first one is that the deck is the same every time that I play it.
Yeah.
So some commanders, I think in particular, mean that we build a deck that kind of orients itself towards a destination. And because of the way the commander is designed, or maybe the way that the commander implies you should build the deck, we sort of end up playing kind of the same game. We get deja vu, right? We're looking at the cards and we're like, these cards are different, but I feel the same.
Or if I play the cards in the exact same way I just played them, it'll turn out the same, and I'll get the same result, which is me winning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And look, Commander's a singleton format, and I think we probably agree that that's what makes it so fun, right? You can have wildly different games of Commander where you draw some cards and not others. And
every draw is, oh, what am I going to get? Oh, that's that card.
Yeah, exactly. Like if we wanted to have exactly the same experience every time, we'd probably lean more towards a 60 card format where you could play 4 copies, right?
For sure.
So my example of a commander that's like this, that made me play the same every single time, was I had and you remember this one?
I do remember that.
Krufix, God of Horizons.
Yeah, I'm getting like a weird fond memory of the times that we had playing that deck, but also just a painful, do I have to watch Walt draw a million cards and create a shitload of mana again? Like,
it really, look, so if those don't know, he's one of those Theros
gods,
indestructible gods, where he becomes a creature if you've got a certain devotion. That doesn't matter at all on Krufix. You're literally just looking at that line of text where it says, if you would lose unspent mana as steps and phases end, instead that mana becomes colorless, and it just stays in your mana pool. So in other words, as an example, let's say I am holding up Counterspell, right? I've got my 2 islands, or my 2 blue mana sources open, and the turn cycle goes round, I decide not to counter anybody. Before my turn, I just tap those 2 islands to add 2 blue to my mana pool, and then as we move through phases, as we move from the end step to my turn, that mana just becomes colorless. So when I untap, I've kind of ramped ahead by 2 mana.
It's a really good commander, and it's really strong, and it's actually really fun to play for certain people too as well. But the thing that I want to give a shout out here is actually a kind of hidden card that does a very similar effect, and it's an artifact. So if you like this effect and you're not playing green-blue, look up the card Horizon Stone. It's a colorless artifact that does the exact same thing as Krufix. If you actually look at the flavor text, it does mention Krufix,
well,
which is really cool. But if you are listening to Walt read out this card and the mechanics, if you like it, go get Horizon Stone, chuck it in your deck. It's a good way to build mana. I run it in Zaxara, actually.
Oh, yeah. I have seen you play that in that deck. Yeah. So, look, the main thing that I was having, the problem I was having, and again, this is a category that I see a lot, is the game was playing the same way. So with Krufix, basically you would ramp a bunch of times to get a load of mana, you'd cast Krufix, and then you'd have a bunch of instants in your hand so you could respond. The counter spells that untapped your lands were particularly good because they basically become free.
Yep.
And then when you have enough mana, you just cast a big splashy spell. You cast a big Eldrazi, you cast an X draw spell. There was a win con that was just Hurricane, the card that deals X damage to each player and each creature without flying. So you just, with flying, sorry. So if you're at the highest life total, you just pay 30 and everyone dies. And look, it was stressful for me to hold up mana. It's not really the way that I deviate towards when I'm playing Commander.
I wonder if you'd change how you play Krufix after listening to our responding episode.
I think I probably would.
Yeah, I'm curious.
I think that's how I'd build the deck, because the way that I had the deck originally, it was like very much about those mana sinks.
Yeah.
But I think if I was to build it again, I'd kind of build it as a control list, like just really good rate spells.
Yeah.
And then just like hold up responses all game, and then just float mana until I had loads. But look, even looking back at it again, I don't think I would play it because, again, the games always went the same. I was ramp,
hold up mana, big explosion, end game.
Yeah, and you saw me play that. I'm sure you said before it was
Yeah.
like pretty much the same experience for you as an opponent every
100%.
time.
And I was probably one of the few people that got to play against Walt's Crewfix deck because it was about at a time when we were in lockdown. It was in between lockdowns, and a lot of it was in lockdown. Thankfully, we could share our little bubble, and we were in the same place. And yeah, and as an opponent for this, it was because it was one of the few decks you had at the time, and it kept coming out. And especially when it was new, when a deck's new, everyone wants to play their new deck over and over again. But as an opponent, it was just really frustrating to sit against because it would play the exact same every single game. And I was switching decks, I was playing different stuff, and it just kept playing the exact same play pattern of ramp, float mana, respond occasionally, blow out the game with one spell.
Yeah, and look, again, as I alluded to at the start, it became less fun for me, and honestly, I could tell it was becoming less fun for my opponents to play against as well.
It's really interesting. The play pattern is one part of why it was frustrating. The indestructible part on Crewfix was another reason why it was really frustrating.
This was definitely a deck where, because we played together so often, me, you, your partner at the time, and occasionally the other housemate who shared the house with us would play together. There was kind of a meta.
It was.
Because we only played with each other for so long.
Yeah.
And I remember you specifically there's that spell from like Commander 2020 or something. It's like each player returns their commander to the command zone, I think, or target player returns their commander to the command zone.
Wash away? Yeah, all commanders they control's the command zone.
Yeah, something like that. I think it's like
actually
a 3-mana instant or something.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll try and find the card that we're talking about. I remember Leadership Vacuum.
Yes.
Leadership Vacuum is the card.
That's the one. I think it's target player returns, because otherwise it'd be way too good. Because I remember it was like a 3-mana instant. So I think it's target player returns their commander to the command zone. But like, you started running that deck because Crewfix was almost impossible for you guys to deal with. And then subsequently I got really mad. And this is kind of like that, you know, they sort of call it an arms race online, right?
Yeah.
Someone's got a really problematic deck, or a deck that's just not really gelling with the table. And so everyone sort of clamors to find the silver bullet to beat it. And then you end up being salty as the person who has the deck. The opponents are salty if their silver bullets don't work.
Yeah.
It just becomes a kind of nasty experience.
It was, but like at the same time, it was, I do remember the moment where you said, all right, I'm retiring this deck. But it became such a staple at our little meta table. It was kind of upsetting for me to see it disassemble, but you then could use those cards elsewhere and they got used somewhere else. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, but like, there is life after death is the way I'm going to try and refer to it through this episode. Because honestly, we're probably going to go down memory lane a lot this episode. And I'm already getting like sentimental with like, oh, I remember the Crewfix days. And I'm just trying to think, James, it's okay. These cards were put to good use elsewhere. We're still having fun games at Commander.
Exactly. We've still got loads of decks as well.
Probably too many.
Well, speaking of that time, can you think, because again, a lot of these decks that we no longer have were built around that time.
Yeah.
Can you think of a deck where it was like this? Like, you every time you played it, it felt like the experience was the same, and you didn't have fun, and your opponents didn't have fun. Was there a deck at around this time that was like that for you? Do you think?
Yeah, and I'm going to shock everyone here. A mono green deck that I built.
Oh.
And you know exactly who it is. It's Gulta.
Yeah. Gulta Primal
Hunger.
Yes.
Primal Hunger.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I remember because I was looking through the binder at the store, and I saw this gorgeous full art version of Gulta. I think it's a promo. If you want to look up the art,
I think it's a store promo, yeah.
And it just looked so cool. It was a big dinosaur with a big open mouth, and like the normal art of Gulta is he's on his side, but this one's like face on.
Yeah, coming towards you.
Toothy more open, saliva dripping, and I was like,
we should probably explain what Gulta does.
Yeah, so this is another reason why I thought the card was so cool, because it's just a 12/12 for 10 and 2 green.
With trample.
With trample, which is a big thing. And if it's your commander, 12 damage is a lot of damage to put on someone, which is, spoiler alert, probably why it plays the goddamn same. But the main thing that it says is, and this is why it's so repeatable, is this spell costs X less, where X is the total power among creatures you control. Now, specifically, not the greatest power among creatures you control, cumulative.
Yeah.
It just counts everything.
It's crazy. And look, the thing that happens with this interaction with command attacks in particular is really interesting. So command attacks it always applies, right? So there's a few commanders that completely cheat around it because they've got activated abilities and stuff. But
Yuriko!
yeah, Yuriko Derevi's a good example. But Galter you do pay the tax. Like, instead of being 10 green, he will cost 12 green the second time. But the way that casting spells in Magic works is you apply additions and then you apply reductions.
So you go, okay, now it costs 12 2 green, but now it costs 13 less because I've got 13 power on the board. Now it costs 2 green again.
Yes, and spoiler alert, this was how it would play at the table when I was playing against it. It never died. When you thought you were rid of it, James looks at his board, does a bit of maths, he's like 5, 6, 11, yep. Green. Galter's back.
Again. And I specifically remember at the time I bought one of the unsets. I think it was Unstable. And it came with a bunch of the full art fancy lands. And I specifically remember there was 2 foils of each color. And I remember putting the 2 fancy green foils of the full art in that Galter deck. And I always set it to the side because it was always the mana I used to cast Galter with.
Just like style points?
It was just, 100%. If I'm winning with it, I'm getting style points here. But you're totally right. It was the exact same playstyle every single game. It was a lot of big power, low mana cost creatures. And to be honest, I built this deck out of my own collection as well. I bought Galter from the store, came home, built the deck that night, said, does anyone want a game? And I think it was really funny. We ended up playing a 1v1, I think the first ever time we played it. And it was 2 hits and you were done because Commander damage.
Commander damage. And I didn't really have blockers. And I think at that time we hadn't really started buying singles yet. Yeah. Shout out to the budget episode about where you should be spending your money. But it was built out of our own collection. Yours was out of your collection. Mine was out of mine. And my collection was substantially smaller than yours. This is the other thing. Like, at the time, that deck was unbeatable. Remember? Nobody could beat that deck.
It actually ended up being the arch enemy deck quite a lot. Yeah. It was like, can anyone kill the dino? No. Okay, we need to figure out how to give neg 12 to Galter.
I vividly remember that the time I felt most proud of my Merrin deck at the time, which has since been revamped. Not really the same, but I won a 1v1 against you when you were playing Galter and I was playing Merrin.
Because of Fleshbag Marauder and Playcraft. Yeah. That's exactly how.
just edict effects. I was just like, yep, sack it again, James. Sack it again. And Spore Frog. Yeah,
and if you want haste in green, Concordant Crossroads is your choice, and that is not a cheap card.
No.
So it was one of those decks where I had to get Galter on field, get to my turn, beat someone in the face. But the deck played the same every single time. And I think as a player as well, we'll talk a little bit about this later, but it was like beating face wasn't what I was enjoying as well. And there's multiple reasons why I took apart this deck, but it did the exact same every single time. And I just got sick of it. And it sat on a shelf for a really long time until I saw Gishath. I was about to say Galter again, but Gishath. Until I saw Gishath, I was like, all right, now I have a reason to disassemble. Galter can go in my Gishath deck. So Galter still lives.
Yeah, and this is going to be a recurring theme, I think, with these decks that we're disassembling is, and I'm going to really stress it again and again, it's not going to feel as bad as you think it is to disassemble a deck, because it's almost always going to make room for a new deck that you're going to have.
For sure.
Half the time, most of the time, you're going to want to build a similar kind of deck. Like, I don't know about you, but I often like to fill the slots in my kind of play styles. Yeah. Shout out to the Playstyles episode.
Oh my god. Episode 10 is coming at perfect time. It's full. We've covered every topic in season 1 of the podcast.
So yeah, like, you're not going to feel that bad disassembling a deck because it's going to make room for a new one. And yeah, like, you loved your big dino and he's still there. He's just in Gishath now.
I got a different big dino at the helm and now I can play 2 extra colors. It's cool.
It's great.
I think, Galter and Crewfix are really good examples of like playing the same over and over again. But there's another reason why you could disassemble a deck, and it's if the deck works or it doesn't. It is like a coin flip 90% of the time. That can be a real reason why you'd want to disassemble a deck.
For sure. I think particularly decks where your commander, because your commander's always going to be a part of the deck and probably a pretty key part of the deck, right?
Huge.
But sometimes the commander is going to basically, either the deck works when you have the commander or the deck doesn't work when you don't.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a big part of this category. But yeah, just in general, if the deck either is on and you feel great, or it's not working and you're behind and you feel terrible.
And you're playing land pass.
Yeah, you're going to more vividly remember, because, we play a 4-player format. Like, even a great deck is only going to win about a quarter of games. So if 75% of the time when we're losing, we're feeling terrible about it. We're not really going to be enjoying most of our games with this deck, right?
No, and it's interesting. I'm going to jump in with a Niv Mizzet story again. I feel like Niv Mizzet is like Kaza, who's mentioned every episode. Do you see how I managed to squeeze Kaza in here?
Oh my god. But is it the recurring theme?
Is the recurring theme?
Devious man.
Wonder why. But I did want to talk about Niv very quickly, about how it was kind of a little bit of the last category of the deck played the same every time. It just kept drawing cards, kept removing everything, kept pinging things down. And it was also sat in this category as well, that it either works or it doesn't. And I actually remember part of this reason was because we got a rule wrong back in the day. Do you remember a O-Ring, Oblivion Ring?
Yeah.
And we completely stuffed up that if the commander is exiled, you can choose to put it back in the command zone. But
yeah.
because we were only playing with a couple of people, we didn't know that rule.
Oh.
So we used to think that if you Oblivion Ringed a commander, it was removing the commander for as long as that enchantment stayed on field.
Yeah, like how O-Ring would work against any other thing. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so funny. It was like the best card. It's like that time where...
I remember when we looked up the single, it was like, why aren't people paying more for this? It's so good!
removes your commander forever! Yeah, which is funny because there is... Oubliette does do that, but it's just funny.
That's
we had
phasing, though.
It is, and that's why it works
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, because we 100% thought that O-Ring didn't work like every other version of that effect for some reason. That's
But like
funny.
again, it was a really close point of, do I disassemble Niv Mizzet? Because it was playing the same every time. It had the same problem with Crewfix, that it was kind of annoying for my opponents to play against and getting this. And then I made the decision to move it to CDH. So there's I disassembled Niv Mizzet in a way and turned it into another deck into Niv Mizzet. So I just wanted to reaffirm the point that there's life after death. You will have reoccurring ways to play that card or the specific strategy, whatnot. It just might be in a different way.
For sure. I think CEDH is probably going to break most of these rules as well. Where it's
for sure. If it's playing the same and winning every time, good. That's a good CEDH
That's
deck.
a really consistent
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's partly the reason why I did want it to go CEDH, because it was so consistent.
Yeah.
And Niv being, one half of the combo being in the command zone. Oh my god.
That's usually what you want to CDH deck, right? Like, again, this category we're in is the deck either works or it doesn't. Godot is still a CDH viable commander because it's a win con on your commander. If you have Helm of the Host in the library, I won't go completely into the combo, but basically, if you have Godot, you resolve Godot, and you can equip Helm of the Host to Godot, you just win.
So yeah, CDH decks kind of break these rules a little bit.
Yeah, which is normally how it goes.
Yeah.
So we're talking mostly about casual commander. So yeah, again, there's going to be these decks that are going to feel bad. It's also going to have this double... You kind of alluded to it already with the O-Ring on the Niv Mizzet thing, but when you have decks that work like this, where they either work or they don't, when people remove your commander, it's going to feel terrible. You always feel bad when your commander's gone, but it's really going to feel like, wow, I can't do anything now.
Especially when that command attack starts to pile up and you're like, okay, I have to spend my whole turn paying 12 mana for my commander just to hope I can get back to my turn.
Well, this is the other thing that's going to happen, is that because people recognize that your deck works when the commander's on the battlefield, they're going to remove it all the time, right? So yeah, you get this kind of double whammy thing of you hate when your commander gets removed, but everyone wants to remove your commander, so it gets removed, which makes you hate it. So it just goes round and round in circles, and it's just not good. So an example of this for me, a deck that I actually disassembled quite recently, so a lot later than Crewfix, which was quite some time ago now. My Obosh the Prey Piercer.
Oh, the Rakdos Burn deck.
Yes. So Obosh is a 5-mana creature. I think he's a Helion. He's a 3/5.
Isn't it companion as well? It's got companion.
It does have companion, so you can run it as a companion. I had it as the commander, so it's just a Rakdos commander deck. And if a source you control with an odd mana value would deal damage, I think anywhere. Yeah, it's not just your stuff, it's anywhere. It deals twice that much damage instead. So you get to build... It's actually a pretty fun deck to build, I will say, because you have to be really creative and go what great spells can I cast at 1 mana value and 3 mana value and 5 mana value. And then you get to play these fun cards that then... have upside because you're building that way. So Extinction Event from Ikoria.
Super sick card.
Yeah, so you choose odd or even, you exile each creature with that.
That's completely one-sided in an Obosh deck.
You don't remove anything of yours. Ashling's Prerogative was really fun.
What's that one?
So it's a 2-mana enchantment. It ETBs and you choose odd or even. It applies to everybody. Each creature with the chosen value, so if you choose odd, has haste. Each creature without the chosen value enters tapped.
Oh, that's amazing.
So your whole board just has haste. Like, it's just 2 mana value. Everything you have has haste.
Sick.
And everything your opponents control is even. Because you never have cast an even creature. All their stuff gets slowed down.
And I will point out as well, the companion requirement for Obosh is that everything in your deck costs odd.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're building a Rakdos deck and want Obosh as if you're building Rakdos Burn with a different commander, if you can build purely odd, you've got an extra card to use.
Yeah.
Obosh is actually phenomenally good.
It's really powerful.
But
everyone knows how powerful it is.
And removes it. How many times did Obosh get hit by a murder, path to exile?
Constantly.
Destroy target creature
Well,
effect.
and this is the other thing. I ramped so often because I wanted to cast him early that I would have to tap out, right? Like, it might be turn 3 or turn 4 when I had 5 mana, but I would tap out to cast him, and then you get 3 full turns where every one of your opponents is looking at Obosh and going, I know exactly what this next turn's going to look like. And they just blow him up. Yeah. And you're like, wow, I've done nothing this whole game. I ramped and I cast my commander and my commander's gone. I am doing actually nothing right now.
And it's funny as well, in Rakdos, your ramp is not great. So like if you're not ramping out really, really well with Obosh, well, you would just be sat there going, okay, cast my commander again, pass turn, that's my entire turn. Oh, cool, he died. Okay, fantastic. My next, cast my commander again, hope it lives, pass turn.
It was also because it was Rakdos, it did okay at drawing cards, but it wasn't great.
Yeah.
And it was a really unfortunate deck to be top decking in. Like, you had to have a full grip because he was chaining those spells together that made it really good.
And look, I've seen Obosh pop off. And Obosh destroy. Like, if Obosh was on field and you had a full grip and you were ready to go, you won the game on that turn.
Yeah.
Easily.
And it was really fun when it was working. But the problem was, so much of the time, it wasn't working. Obosh would get removed. I had like 3 spells in my hand.
And those effects like Fiery, Anger of the Gods that deals 3 damage to each creature are just not good enough without Obosh down.
No, they become really bad. I had there were a lot of spells that were like that were like deals 2 damage to each opponent. And with Obosh down, that's 4 damage to each opponent. That feels amazing. But just like paying 3 mana to deal 2 damage to each opponent, it's pretty bad.
There's a reason why this deck could be built on a budget. It's because most of the cards in it are shit.
Yeah, because they're only good with Obosh. Yeah. And so, like, again, it was really fun to build, but in practice when I was playing it either, I popped off and I won and it was, like, so much fun, or most of the time, I didn't really do anything, which felt really bad.
Yeah, I think that the decks that are the best to play are the ones that you could literally not cast your commander the entire game. Especially in a casual format. Like, if you can play your deck without casting your commander and it can win, you built a really, really good deck. That's awesome.
And if it's fun to play while you're doing that as well, if just chaining your spells together that are in the 99 is fun. And I'll also take it a step further and say, if when you're losing, you're having fun with your commander deck,
that's
huge.
The
sign of a really great deck, right?
That's huge. Especially if you're losing in a horrific way. Like, you've been blown out of the water. Like, you've got, like, you'd done all, like, a typical James move, ramped out with a bunch of mana rocks, and then someone Vandal Blast, and you're like, oh, crap, okay, I've got nothing. But I'm still drawing cards that I can cast. My commander doesn't really matter in this situation. I'm still interacting with the board. I'm still having a good time with my friends. I've got a good deck.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to keep repeating myself, but disassembling that deck that feels really inconsistent will make room for a deck like that one, where you get to have a lot of fun even when you're losing.
I have a really good example of a deck that did that and has now made room for one of my favorite decks, Brutaclad.
Oh, the precursor to Brutaclad. I think I know what you're going to say here.
Dalico's Crafter of Wonders was one of the decks that I attempted so hard to build and make good because I wanted to prove that it could do other things. So for those that don't know, Dalico's Crafter of Wonders is a really weird red-blue card. It's from Theros Beyond Death. It was a very weird card to be in red and blue. Made sense because it did a lot with artifacts, but basically Dalikos is an artificer that taps for 2 colorless.
I think he's 1 blue-red to cast.
1 blue-red to cast. Yeah. He taps for 2 colorless, but you can only use it to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. The other thing that it said on it was equipped creatures have haste and flying. what a random piece of text to be
It's
on an
a
is it
weird
card.
Even after playing so much more Commander, I still think about that guy and go like, what the hell are they thinking?
And also, it's a really cool looking card. He
Yeah.
has like a really cool art because he's like this merfolk wizardy type dude with like this big mohawk type fin, and he's like working on this like flying contraption, and the card's
He's got a
sparkly.
sword as well in his hand. Yeah.
It's a sick looking card. And James, seeing red blue, was like, oh my god, I'm going to build this and make it good. Is it equipment done right? Spoiler alert, it worked some of the time. Like, really, really fun when it did work, because I built the deck with two themes. The big beaters. Firstly, the deck was designed to generate a ton of colorless mana and drop really big artifact creatures. Like Traxos was in there.
That's right.
There was a bunch of like colors. I had a couple of Eldrazi's, but not a lot at the time. Probably would have been funner to build it with Eldrazi's, but there you go. Basically, the point of the deck was to either win in two ways. It was to either slam big creatures and equip them with some really dinky little equipments, usually ones that gave trample to make sure the damage goes over, to give them flying and haste and beat face. That was one strategy. Or the other strategy, which kind of helped it get there, was tapping and untapping shenanigans. And we're surprised that my favorite player on game nights is Josh Lee Kwai. So, because Delacoste taps for 2, and to activate colorless, you can use it to activate artifacts. There is a lot of artifacts that you can fiddle around with to get things to untap and tap again. One of my favorite planeswalkers actually ended up being in that deck with the Ralzarek.
It was like tap one permanent, untap a permanent.
Yeah.
Like uptick.
And it was just like, I only ever used it for that. The downtick, his ultimate is wild, by the way. It's flip 5 coins. For every coin flip you get right, take an extra turn.
Oh god, I remember playing against this. It was it's the classic Planeswalker thing. If you don't keep track of where the Planeswalker is at,
whoopsie daisy,
James just untaps and starts grinning, and you go, oh no. And then James goes, I'm going to flip these 5 coins.
Main phase 1.
Oh god.
Yeah, so Delacoste did work because it had a strategy, it had a synergy. Delacoste was probably one of the decks that I tinkered with, well, Crafter 1 was Tinkerer, but like tinkered with the most because I really wanted it to work. And I remember watching a lot of deck building videos, and not that long after Theros came out, Game Nights actually did an episode where Jimmy played with Delacoste.
I remember that episode, yeah.
And he won in probably one of the most impressive ways ever. Josh Lee Kwai was popping off, going nuts, and Jimmy just managed to stop him in like the most incredible way ever. There was an Ember Cleave involved. It was just really cool. I can't remember exactly, but I looked at it and was like, I really, really want this to work. And it did some of the time.
Yeah.
Every other time, it was like, I've got a bunch of colorless mana and nothing to pump it into, or nothing to cast from my hand, or this creature gets flying and haste, but it's gonna get blocked or killed, or like, it just didn't work. And like, Delacoste was good as the commander. If it got removed, it didn't matter as much as Obosh did, but it also needed to be there to make any hope of the deck work. Like, if there was a creature there, the evasion was important, so I needed Delacoste back. It was one of those decks that, again, either worked or it completely didn't.
It's definitely equipment decks. I've noticed because I've got a Seguin deck.
Yeah,
they're quite delicate because in order for it to work, you normally need, unless it's a Voltron deck, you normally need a bunch of equipment and also a bunch of creatures that want to have equipment on them.
Yeah,
and it's whenever you build a commander deck, and I'm sure everyone out there who's built a few decks can resonate with this. If you require multiple different types of cards for the deck to work, and your commander has no way of reliably getting them, sometimes the deck's just not going to work at all. So if you have an equipment deck that's about going wide, sometimes you'll draw all the creatures, and sometimes you'll draw all the equipment, and only really on the games when you get both will it work. You can get around it if there's like a way of drawing lots of cards or a way of tutoring or something, but most decks that you build where you're trying to do 2 things and you need cards in both of those categories, then often not going to work. And my memory of Delacoste when you played it was this would happen.
A pile of equipments on my playmat being like, they're ready to go.
No creatures. Yeah, and I also, a memory I have of this deck that kind of fits into this, either working or it doesn't, is I remember there being, because there was this tap untap theme, there were often games where you were like just kind of spinning the wheels.
Oh,
you were like
100%.
Tap this to untap this, put this equipment here, tap, untap,
This
go to combat, swing for 3.
Woohoo! Yeah, baby, it's working.
Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely
Yeah.
either worked or it didn't. For sure.
100%. And it, like we alluded to earlier, the precursor of Brutaclad was this deck. So when I took it apart, I found another Izzet Commander, which I've already spoken about a million times, but it worked in Artifacts. It was an Artifact synergy that was different and unique and allowed me to play the way I wanted. So even with the death of Dalekos, which, by the way, he's still in my binder if anyone wants him, he is free to a good home. It gave birth to Brutaclad, which is one of my favorite decks to play.
Yeah, I think we mentioned Brutaclad. It feels like almost every episode.
Nearly, yeah.
And it's definitely, I think if I was to think of like 3 or 4 decks that I associate most with you, Brutaclad would be in there. I think it'd be sort of like Brutaclad, Scarab God, and Niv Mizzet probably would be my top 3 for you.
Yeah, interesting. Yuriko probably jumps in there as well.
Yeah, but it's interesting. You played Yuriko a lot when we first started playing, but lately not so much. I think it sits at a weird power level now where it's almost a bit too strong for casual and not quite strong enough for high powered. And
it is, and then 90% of the time when I pull it out, those casual tables, I win really quickly.
Yeah, it's happened to me a few times now.
Well, I might have to look at Yuriko as possibly being dissembled or retuned or something. Who knows?
Sad.
Yeah, but
it'll make room for something else. Yep, as we're saying. Yeah. Well, I think we're just about done with that one, James. You already throw a bit of paper.
Sure. Please don't hit me in the eye. Oh my god!
Okay.
Both landed on Walt, like in Walt's lap.
Thankfully, they just sort of gently caressed me.
It was like a gentle touch your arm fall into your lap. It was quite. It went like about half a meter away and came back too. We should make paper airplanes.
Just bits of paper. We just throw them. So another thing that's going to happen with decks that I think is going to make us want to disassemble them is if they don't really suit our playstyle. Shout out to the playstyles episode.
What the hell? This episode is such a penultimate episode. It's tying everything together.
Oh, it's true. So look, as we've alluded to there in that episode, it's going to be fun to branch out away from our typical play style sometimes.
So what you're saying is you should play casually because you're a spike.
That's as far as I'll go.
Yeah.
No, as we talk about in that episode, it's fun to go a little bit out, but if we try and go too far out of our play style, we sometimes just won't have fun.
Yeah.
And I think I've had this happen to me with a commander deck before. And it was my Kaikar Wins Fury deck.
It's so funny that you bring this up because you know when you just said before that, I associate these decks with you. Weirdly, Kaikar is one of the decks that I would associate with you strongly. I think still to this day, I think that for you, my decks for you would probably go Azor the Lawbringer, then Reese the Redeemed would probably be the next one, and then probably Merrin and Kaikar.
Wow. So that they're like the OGs. They're like all my... I mean, that makes sense. I guess most of the decks I would associate with you are from back then as well. Yeah, I mean, we played a lot of Commander during lockdown, so it makes sense. Funnily enough, this deck, as opposed to the last category, this deck won a lot. It was
really good.
It was pretty solid. I kind of used as a reference point, Mitch from the Commander's Quarters had done a deck where he'd done an Anthem deck. So Kaikar, for those who don't know, it's 1 and then Jeskai, so blue, white, red. For a 3/3 flying, I'm going to say Bird Wizard. That's a guess. Yeah, Bird Wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you make a 1/1 white spirit with flying. And you can sacrifice a spirit to add red to your mana pool. So you can go lots of different ways with this. I've seen a few like sort of Jeskai Spellslinger decks, which totally makes a lot of sense. This was an Anthem deck.
Really cool. Flood the board, make them big.
Yeah, well, it kind of made sense, right? Like, so most Anthems are not on creatures. So they're enchantments, right? So they're non-creature spells. So what you would kind of get is every time you're casting an Anthem, you're making a spirit, which is being pumped by the Anthem. So before long, you're kind of ending up with like, oh, I've got these 5/1/1 spirits. Oh, hold on. They're 4/4s with flying. I swing at you for 20. So it was pretty strong. And then there's kind of this side theme that would happen where because you can sack the spirits for red, you'd play a bunch of just like X red spells.
Because you just, and like in response to a board wipe, you just...
Yeah, you just kill, you just like deal 20 damage to somebody.
Yeah.
It was really strong. But the thing that was happening is it wasn't really gelling with the way that I wanted to play. It was ended up being quite control-y because it was kind of quite delicate, and it kind of wanted me to leave things up, and a lot of spirits, because I kind of wanted to be spirit tribal. A lot of spirits had flash as well. It also, I kind of wanted to build a spirit tribal deck because I pulled a Drogskull Captain in a mystery booster. Buffs your spirits by +1/+1 and gives them hexproof.
It's pretty good in your deck, though.
It is. But the thing is, mostly the deck didn't want to play spirits, weirdly,
They
because
wanted to use the non-creature
you want
thing.
non-creature spells. So I kind of ended up in this weird spot where it was like a control-y list that was also kind of like this Mitch list, and also spirit tribal, but there weren't almost any spirits in there.
And I do remember you having that look on your face every time you went to your turn. It would be this really furrowed brow, and you'd be thinking really hard. And then sometimes you'd pass the turn irritated because you couldn't figure out the right line. And every time I'd do something, you'd be like, in response, oh, I can't think of how to do this. Oh, yeah, it's fine, it resolves. And I think that's really testament to how frustrating this was for you as a player, because it did not sit inside your playstyle at all.
No, it really... But it's funny, it's kind of sounding a bit like the Krufix thing again, right?
Yeah.
It's that, like, I need to do things in response, which is funny because these days I still like that, but I think I mostly like to just do a bunch of stuff on my turn, is kind of probably my playstyle in general. It also sort of felt like, it was kind of like that first category we were talking about where the decks always played the same, where because every non-creature spell made a spirit and the spirits were flying and almost no one had flying blockers, it did kind of feel like the deck almost played itself and played itself in a similar way every time, where it was kind of just like, I'll just play anthems. And eventually I'll leave up counter spells, but mostly I just play anthem. Okay, my spirits are 5/5s. Take 25. Oh, you're dead. Sorry. Bye-bye.
Honestly, like I said, it's a really good deck. And I remember being very upset when you took it apart. I actually bought Kaikar off you.
You did. You were like,
still in my binder.
Wow. I remember you being really adamant that you were like, I really like the way that this was played, and I want to play something like that.
Well,
how funny.
Not only that, I think it was the perfect blend of Walt and James's play styles put together, because it had all the right pieces of our play styles and the way we like to play. It had tribal for you. You love building tribal decks.
I do.
You love tokens. You love buffing stuff, like going wide and then making them beefy. So it had all that, but then it had this really cool fast mana generation and responding, always having an answer, always having mana available for me. And it was like this perfect in the middle. And it was perfect of our colours too. It had the white in there for you, had the red and blue for me.
Perfect our colours. 2 for me and 1 for Walt. Actually, that's not true. I do play a lot of red as well. So
you do play a lot of red.
That's probably our overlap, right? The red.
Yeah.
You go the red blue. I go the white red. Probably.
Which is weird because when you put red white together, it's Boros, which isn't you at all. No. But like Selesnya is like tokens building, growing. That's more you. But you do have a lot of red in your decks. Yeah, you do.
I do. I think I remember doing the maths recently because every now and then I get curious and I'd work out like how many commanders I had of each color. So like Merrin would be black and green.
Oh, so that's a 1 tick in each.
Yeah, and Azor would be white and blue. And for a while, around the middle, when I had sort of 6 or 7 decks, green was like really strongly represented.
Of course.
But then of course I ended up kind of being like, I kind of want to try artifacts and I kind of want to try like Boros equipment and like all this other stuff. And so the last time I did it, actually white is my most played color.
I'm not surprised.
Followed closely by red, and then green was shortly behind. Black was my least played color.
Yeah, it'd be blue then black for sure for you.
Because I built 2 blue decks recently, the Kaza and the Targan.
Yeah. What do you think mine is? I think, interestingly, blue would probably be number 1.
Blue would be number 1. I actually think black would probably be before red.
I think it would be, because I have Scarab God and Yuriko in Dimir, and then I have Zaxara, and Liesa is another one of my favorite black decks. So I think black is really up there.
Yeah, whereas the decks that are red but not black would be
Niv-Mizzet,
Phylath, Brutaclad. I reckon they'd be pretty close. Grixis is definitely like comfortably ahead of green and white. Like very comfortably.
I'm now thinking like on a percentage, it would probably be like 80% Grixis, 20% Selesnya.
Oh, I reckon if we were going like, what percentage of James's decks contain one of blue, black, or red, I reckon it would be like 85%.
Do any of my decks not have that requirement?
Right?
Can you think of any?
So they'd have to be...
It has to be either
green or white.
Siona is green
but
and
you
white.
Never play.
That's so true.
That's pretty funny.
But look, we're getting a bit sidetracked here.
Yes.
But like Kaikar was one of those decks that had a really good way of playing, and it fit. And like, I literally bought the card off you because I was like, this is such a good place. It's winning. It's doing interesting stuff. It doesn't win the same all the time. It's doing different things. It's so good. And you're sat there like, this just isn't me.
No.
I'm so bored of this.
Yeah, it was funny. It was just like the kind of deck that, and I actually saw a tweet recently, yesterday, weirdly, when I'd already written the plan for this episode. I think it was Rachel Weeks or someone that I follow who plays Commander on Twitter tweeted, "How do you know it's time to say farewell to a deck?" And I was like, what?
Weird.
I literally just wrote an episode for this. Anyway.
So Rachel Weeks, if you're out there, hi, how you doing?
Yeah, thanks so much, Rachel. There was a comment that was like one of the top ones from Olivia. I blanked on her last name.
Oh, vampire player.
Yeah, Olivia. Anyway, you'd know
She's a
her.
streamer. She's on Game
Yeah,
Nights.
she's Affinity Artifacts is her Twitch channel. She plays loads of Commander.
She's also
great.
really cool.
Olivia Gobert Hicks.
There we go.
Olivia Gobert
Nailed
Hicks. She replied and said, when you don't reach for the deck anymore, when you've got your 3 or 4 decks that you're bringing to Commander Night or to your pod, and it's not the one you're reaching for. And I thought that's so interesting because Kaikar, I had fun when I played it, like most of the time. There was some times where it wasn't so fun and it kind of didn't suit my playstyle. But also, importantly, if that was alongside 3 of my other decks, it didn't even matter what those other decks were. I'd always reach for the other 3. Yeah. I'd always leave Kaikar on the side. And I think that is a good sign that it's time to say bye to it. Do you have a deck that's kind of like my Kaikar where you built it and then realized, this isn't really me? Or...
I do, yeah. And it's funny because I built it trying to be like you, which is funny. Because I saw you building a lot of tribal decks and decks with themes. I was like, okay, I want to try doing this. And I had a card in my collection that I got from a mystery booster. And at the time, she was bonkers expensive. I think she was like $25-$30. Marchesa.
Queen Marchesa.
Queen Marchesa.
The Mardu one. Yeah,
not the Black Rose or the
Grixis one.
The Grixis one.
The Black Rose, I think. Yeah,
this is the Mardu one. The one that
Queen Marchesa.
ETBs makes you the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you're not the Monarch, you create a 1/1 Death Touch Haste.
Yep.
Pretty good commander. It's got a lot of value stable to it. It's got the Monarch mechanic in it. Awesome.
Yep. Walt built this recently.
Walt did build it recently.
The Goth tribal deck.
And I got to play it the other night.
Actually, you did?
I rocked up to the store and was like, I don't have a deck. Can I grab one of yours?
I actually offered him 4.
And I was like, this one, bye. I didn't even look at. I can't even remember what the other ones were.
No.
Had a great time playing it, by the way.
Yeah.
Really well made. It's like,
Thank you.
I know that you built the deck with your partner in mind, and everything had to be approved by her. But even then, even with that insane restriction on it, it really had a strategy. It played super cleanly.
I was shocked. I felt like I was kind of building it slightly suboptimally when I was building
not
it.
at
But
all.
yeah, when you actually pull it out, I think it's the kind of deck that didn't goldfish very well. Like when you're kind of trying all the cards on your own, it didn't really seem like it made sense. But then when you put it at a table, because the way the Monarch works, it suddenly was like so much stronger.
Good. Yeah. And then like the politics of it is super cool.
Yeah.
Really good deck. My Marchesa deck though, I was so eager to build a theme and a tribe, and I was like, Queen Marchesa, what should it be? Oh, the Queen has knights. I'll build Knight Tribal. And we actually, funnily enough, just got out of, I think it was Throne of Eldraine, was just the set recently printed.
Yeah.
And there was actually weirdly quite a lot of knights in that, because it was that
Heaps
fairy
of knights.
There's a fairy tale set, lots of Knight Tribal stuff going on. And because I was going to a lot of drafts, I had quite a lot of the cards. So I was like, all right, cobbled it together, had some acclaimed contender in it, which like ETBs, you look at the top 6, get a knight or something like that.
Yeah.
Lots of cards that worked really well together. Did they synergize with the commander? No. Like, and like the other thing was like, I love holding up answers and responding, and generally play outside of combat. Combat's one of those things that I'm like, okay, I've got reconnaissance mission. I could draw a card here. That's how I view combat. I don't
an opportunity to draw cards.
Yeah, I don't view combat as like a win con all the time. Some of my decks do, but not all the time. And it didn't fit my playstyle at all. I found myself literally forcing myself to empty my hand and leave no mana available, because that's what the deck wanted to do. Surprise, surprise. Mardu does not want to respond a lot. It wants to be big BT, suit 'em up, swing, and it honestly bored the shit out of me. Like, to put it bluntly.
Look, compared to some of the other decks that we've talked about, where I think we've both sort of remember fondly the decks.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't really remember this deck fondly. It was cobbled together from your collection, admittedly, but yeah, like the strategy wasn't very strong, and it really didn't suit you. Like when you do combat and it's fun for you, it's usually kind of like in the same way that I do, Spell Slinger and I do control in like a Walt tokens go wide way. When you do combat, you do it in a responsey way.
Yeah,
so
or
like your
there's like
Firelaf-
chances, or like, Firelaf is combat in a really weird way because you can send damage direct to face, or in the middle of combat you can sacrifice stuff.
Yeah, I think like last episode you were talking about how you love your like fling effects and you love your greater good and stuff like that. You're
Gishath
already
as
thinking,
well. Like Gishath, it's when it deals damage, there's like this weird mini game you get to play in the middle of. I hope I hit a dinosaur. Like, I don't like combat where it's just simple. All right, go to damage, it resolves. Second main, I've already cast everything, pass turn. Yeah. That is so dull. I cannot like express. And like I've had a look on EDH Rec, and Night Tribal, weirdly as a theme, uses Queen Marchesa as a commander quite a lot.
I have seen it, yeah.
I think it's because she creates Death Touch blockers, which is always good for a deck that swings. She also has a card draw mechanic staple to her, and a card draw mechanic that cares about combat damage. You got to get the Monarch to draw a card in your end step. And admittedly, Mardu is not fantastic at drawing cards, so she's a good value card stapled to her. But I think if I went about this deck again, I would build it completely different. If I went Night Tribal, I'd go Night Tribal, but I would really rethink how the deck worked and what the other cards that I include in, if there's like any flash that I could play or any combat tricks. I think there's plenty to do now, like that Samurai from the Kamigawa set, when if an attack triggers an ability, it doubles.
Oh, Ishin.
Yeah. Maybe that could be a fun thing to play with.
For sure.
Like, I might be able to rebuild it in a funner way, because I now have 3 copies of Queen Marchesa in my binder.
Oh my lord.
Just randomly. I know I was sorting my binder out the other day, and it was just like, oh, cool, I've got 3 of these. I have 2 Captivating Vampires. Didn't know. They're like $30 each. I was like,
wow, I don't remember where they came from.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Go through your binder. You'll find some bombs. And honestly, I disassembled this deck pretty quick. I built it and then did not upgrade it. It got disassembled that quickly.
Yeah. And again, it was because it just didn't suit you.
No, it wasn't me.
And it as we keep on saying, it made room for more other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of those black and white staples probably eventually ended up in your Liesa deck, which is way more you.
Ghostly Prison is in my Liesa deck that was in that deck originally. And 100%. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Queen Marchesa turned into Liesa.
Yeah, and that was... we can confidently say that was an upgrade for you, right? You have way more fun playing that deck.
Yeah, if you...
Cruel man.
If you've never played against my Liesa deck, if you don't know the card... she is a phenomenal 5/5 flying lifelink angel that costs 5. I think it's 2 white, black, or 2 black.
I think it's white, black.
White, black.
Yeah.
Now, she reads, anytime a player, including you, casts a spell, they lose 2 life. And instead of paying command attacks, you pay 2 life for each command attacks that you have on her to cast her out of the command zone. So she comes out a lot. The way I built the deck is death and taxes. Light on the taxes, heavy on the death is how I like to call it. It's.
I'd like to point out that James did a little, almost a little curtsy as he said that. Light on the taxes, heavy on the death.
It's honestly, and this is how I like to introduce it to the table, because I want to make it seem like it's not one of those stacks, because it's not. It's death by 1,000 cuts, for sure. I built the deck to be heavy on life gain, and then just a lot of kind of pillow 40 type effects, and let my opponents slowly kill themselves.
It's shocking how quickly it adds up. That 2 life per spell.
And it's really fun too, because there's other ways the deck can win. I've found that black is really good at generating a ton of mana in a turn. So I have...
You have a few ways to tutor lands, I know for sure, and
Correct.
you often get Urborg and Cabal Coffers. Yeah.
That's a recent upgrade. That only happened this year.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, so I was playing the deck for 2 years without it, and
Oh, because you also have the one where swamps tap for twice as much, right? That creature that's got Extort. Yeah, Cryptghast. That's the
so
one.
You can get a lot of mana.
For
so
sure.
Things like Debt to the Deathless, what a way to end the game.
Oh, I think you got an Exsanguinate in that deck as well, don't you?
I took Exsanguinate out.
Did you really?
Funnily enough, because I was because it kept winning with the big mana splashy spell.
Right.
And I was like, it's a good way to win, but I don't want to win with it all the time. I want people to die. I want the game, and if you're out there, Johnny, listening, I played one of the first ever games I played with Liesa. I was playing against one of our community members, Johnny, who was playing a Rogue Rack deck. I can't remember what the pairing was, but it was
It's probably Rograk and
Ardenn, I think.
the one that suits up a whole bunch of equipment for free.
Yeah, so you slide them all on Rograk and swing. It was a good deck. However, I killed all these creatures, and he had a bunch of equipment on the field. I put him to 1 life and passed the turn. And I had Liaser on field, so if he cast a spell, he died. And I refused. It was so funny. I mean, thankfully, Johnny was a real good sport, and it was funny. It wasn't as cruel as it might come across, because he was laughing, I was laughing. Johnny, if you comment that it's totally different and it was cruel, you had the option to concede. I apologize. But yeah, I just left him on 1, and anytime he cast a spell, he'd die.
Evil. Absolute evil. Well, look, I hope that going on that deep dive on the Acer has shown you all that, yeah, James is happy to have disassembled his Marchesa deck and made that instead.
I played 30 games with that Queen Marchesa deck, and it's gone, and now I've played 100 games with Liaser, and it's so much more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think it's worth hopping in here and explaining what we would recommend you do if you are going to disassemble a deck, right? Because I hope this encourages you to disassemble at least one of your deck. Maybe not now, but eventually, at some point, especially if you're going to be making lots of them, you're going to want to do it, right?
Because instead of that deck collecting dust, it could be making you have fun at the game store with your friends.
Yeah, and that's going to be the first thing I'm going to recommend for sure. It's like, especially if it's a deck that fits a theme that you like, but the deck itself isn't fun. So like, lands, for instance. If you've got a lands deck, like my lands deck at the moment is Rada, Heart of Keld, which is like a very Voltron lands deck, and I do like it, but I'm actually going to be disassembling that to make room for Averna, the Chaos Bloom.
So cool.
It's so weird. It's a Teamer deck. When you cascade, you can play lands from the cards that you cascade.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
It's bizarre, but I can't wait to see it.
It's
I got
very
a peek
wild.
of the list. I got a peek of the list earlier today, and I'm very keen to see it. Very keen to see it.
Yeah. So it's often going to be how you're going to want to do it, I think. You're going to want to be less so focused on how much you don't like the deck that you're playing and more focused on how fun the deck you're going to be building is. So if you find a commander that plays that theme like lands that you want to be playing, but it looks way more fun than yours, just swap it. Like, it doesn't cost you anything, right?
Also, keep an eye on like sets that come out, and if there's a commander that suits, because like sometimes your deck will have such a specific theme. Like, for example, Shrines is a really good example. A new Shrine commander, just like Go Shintai, came out, and all of a sudden Shrine decks popped off because all those kind of okay Shrine decks, I mean, a lot of them use Sisei, which you use as your Shrine deck commander.
Yeah, I've still left it as Sisei,
It's still really good, and it's still great to tutor with and all that kind of stuff, but Go Shintai, oh my god.
Oh, it pops off. It goes crazy.
It's an objectively better Shrines commander. So, like, keep an eye on the new commanders coming out. It might replace one of your current ones.
Absolutely. There's so many legendary creatures that they print these days. So you're going to be spoiled for choice, for sure.
100%.
So I think we've covered that a lot, talking about building new decks from our old ones. But let's say you are disassembling it and you're not immediately transitioning it into another deck. What would you do you reckon with the cards? Like, what's your kind of, like, let's imagine you're disassembling your Marchesa deck. What's kind of the process you're going through when you're
There's two options. It's right. Am I going to use this card again?
Yeah.
Yes or no. If I am, fantastic. I'll put it in my storage, or maybe put it, because the way I build decks is I usually have in my bedroom I have this like long desk thing, and I have this pile of cards for decks I'm thinking about building, and they're kind of sorted in a stack of like, okay, I'm thinking about building Bear Force 1 at the moment, so there's a stack of green cards on my desk that's just sat there.
It's like bears and stuff.
Yeah, so if I disassemble a deck and I've got a card that I'm like, oh, it kind of suits this idea that I'm building, I'll put it in that pile. Fantastic. Put it in your storage box. If you don't want to use it again, slam that shit in a trade binder. Get rid of it. If anyone wants a Queen Marchesa or a Dalico's Crafter of Wonders, hit me up.
James is said he's got you covered.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that when you do put these cards in your binder, especially the more expensive ones, you're probably going to trade for a card that you are going to have fun with, right?
That's how you... have you ever traded for a card you didn't want?
Yeah, okay, look, maybe it's pretty obvious.
It's pretty obvious. Like, you are going to get rid of a card you don't need, you don't want. That's the whole basis of this trading card game, is this doesn't fit what you're doing. Give it to someone that it might fit what they're doing, and see what they've got. This is also a really good strategy for trading, and I think we should do a whole episode on trading, personally. It's probably a whole podcast series. It's probably 10 episodes that you could talk about.
Probably,
But
yeah.
I have a hot tip for traders out there. If you have a card that you don't like, but you know it's worth some money, and if it fits in a certain strategy, let's say it just came out of your lands deck, for like Crucible of Worlds. Let's say you had a Crucible of Worlds and you've just taken it out of the deck because you've disassembled it. And then you think back, oh, I was at the store the other day and someone was playing a lands deck. They don't have a Crucible of Worlds. Hit them up. Go to the store and be like, hey, I've got a Crucible of Worlds. Do you want it? Have a look at their binder, see what you can do. If you've got cards that you know someone will enjoy, go get them that card because you're always going to get something in return.
For sure. And I think when you trade with people that you often play with, whether it's your, like in our case, the people at our game store, or for other people, it's their play group, those are the ones you really remember because then you get to see the card that you remember in someone else's deck and it's great in their deck and they're having fun and they get the exact same experience from your deck, right? They see your Crucible of Worlds and go, hey, I traded you that Crucible of Worlds. That's mine. And it's like, well, it's not yours anymore. They're not trying to steal it back from you, I hope.
But there's heaps of cards that even me and you have just done that with in private. Like Arcanus the Omnipotent was one that I remember I got from you that I put in Niv Mizzet way back in the day. Because it's tap, draw 3 cards.
It's true. It's true. Awesome. I'm struggling to think of other ones where like you traded them to me. I remember some trades that in hindsight were not good value anymore. Like, really? I remember I traded, it was actually your partner at the time, but I traded them for Recruiter of the Guard. And I think I traded away Obnixilis and Runescarred Demon.
Yeah.
In hindsight, Runescarred Demon's great. Obnixilis, not so good. Recruiter of the Guard is now like $45 and it's really strong.
What a trade. What a trade. I also remember I traded you a Jeska's Will back in the day, and that is always kept climbing.
It was a borderless Jeska's Will, James.
Was it really?
It was.
Oh my god, how much is that worth now?
It's like $50. And at the time
I probably would have given it to you for 15, 20.
I think it was more like 5, man.
Oh my god.
I feel so bad in hindsight looking back at that. But it's what they were worth at the time.
Buy me a beer.
Every time you see it though, you'll remember that.
I do. That's is it in a deck? What deck is it in?
It's in Krenko, which I
that makes a
lot
of sense.
Yeah, never play it. Anyway, so that's basically the tips, right? We sort of covered the ways that we the reasons we might want to disassemble our decks, and then what you would do with them if you did it. I just want to emphasize again for the last time that those pet cards and those pet decks that you are attached to but you're not having a blast with, they're the things that are in the way of you building that next really creative deck, that really strange deck, that really you deck that you want to build. So get them out of the way and don't let this bad deck get between you and your next fun one. And
mourn for an appropriate period of time and move on. Seriously, you will feel bad disassembling decks. Sometimes you'll have friends that really don't want you to disassemble the decks because they love it for whatever reason. Like Walt with Kaikar. I did not want you to disassemble that because I thought it was so good, but I'm glad you did because it gave birth to new things and, it moved the card into my trade binder.
Is this just the trade episode? That seems to be the conclusion.
I feel like we're probably going to reference this when we do get around to doing a trade episode.
Maybe we will. Maybe we will. All right. Well, thanks for listening. And for you guys out there, have you disassembled any of your Commander decks? And did you end up having more fun afterwards? Like, which of your decks did those decks become? And what did you do with the cards? Where'd they go? Who's got them now? I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, I really want to specifically hear about decks that you tried and hated for whatever reason. I want to know that I'm not alone in my Marchesa story, that there are other people that went out and went, I love this style, played it once and went, fuck this.
I hate this so much. Yeah. I also want to remind everybody that we've got our Q&A episode is next episode.
Oh, I'm so excited.
It's so soon now. Please get your questions in. We've got a stack of them already. We're super excited to look at them. I've got so many that I'm looking at and I'm going, I cannot wait to read this and to answer this on the podcast. So please, if you have anything else you want us to say, comment on the SoundCloud video, so the recording, comment on the YouTube. We'll add it to our list. You can also message us directly on Facebook if you are friends with us on Facebook. And again, anything that we don't cover in that Q&A episode is very likely to become its own full podcast episode. So please get us those questions. We want to know what you guys are thinking about. We want to know what you guys want from us. So let us know.
I'm so excited for this because I feel like it's going to be a very easy episode to run through because it's just us being like, this question, let's chit chat. It's also... We've got nothing planned for season 2. Like I'm saying, like our seasons are 10 episodes. We're ending on a Q&A. I feel like that's a good way of running our season by season. We've got nothing planned officially. So this is season 2 planning of our podcast and we're so excited. And while I'm on the topic of the podcast, as I mentioned in last episode, we are working with someone who I'm not going to mention yet. This amazing local company that we're going to be working with to get this distributed to Apple Music and podcasts and Spotify podcasts and where else. So when that happens, please spread it far and wide. And episode 10 might look and sound a little bit different. I'm not going to say anything yet. Just
potentially.
Keen.
We'll see how we go. But yeah, it's going to be really exciting. We're really looking forward to it. As is tradition, James, play of the week.
This happened 2 days ago.
Oh, wow.
Legitimately, I knew exactly the moment that I was like, okay, this is my play of the week for the podcast because it was a 3-player game, which, by the way, usually I now only play 4-player Commander.
Probably because of lockdown, all those 3-player games that we play, you and your partner,
Specifically, 3-player games always end up in Arch Enemy. 5-player games always end up being 6 hours long. 6-player games, you feel like you're falling asleep at the table. 8-player games are people that hate themselves and their friends. Like, anything out of 4-player, I just kind of go, this isn't right.
No,
right?
I agree.
By the way, a one-on-one Commander... very weird format to play. But I'm not sure if you guys have seen this. If this episode gets out in time, Post Malone is doing a 1v1 competition. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I think the winner gets $100,000.
That's so cool. I'll throw down with you, Posty. Come on. Like, like if you're listening to this, and this episode's, years past and we ended up making it and we're big in the circuit now. Post Malone, if you hear this, challenge me.
Bring
1v1.
Bring it on.
I'll put $10 on the line. You can throw the 100K down.
Wow, 100K, $10 prize pool.
Yeah. It's big.
Nice.
Big. So this happened a couple of days ago, and basically it was myself, Theo, and Butters. In our community, if you don't know Butters, his real name is Jacob. I call him Butters, and every time I say Jacob, it feels weird. So Butters is his name. Now, Butters was playing Derevi, which we actually did mention in this podcast, a commander that gets around command attacks.
Yeah, we did,
Because Derevi has this incredible ability that just is 1 and Bant, which is white, green, blue, put Derevi on the battlefield from the command zone.
Who thought this would be a good idea?
It's even more dumb than Yuriko, because Yuriko has a requirement. There has to be an unblocked attacking creature for you to ninjutsu her in. Derevi? Nope.
No. Just don't pay command attacks. Just don't do it. It's not even Lieso. You have to pay life. It just says never ever pay command. Oh, I hate it. I think it's so stupid. I'm glad they don't do things like that anymore.
And it's an ability. Instant speed, baby.
So dumb.
You can just activate that from the commands. It's one of those commanders that was printed at a time where Wizards thought Commander was a dumb, stupid format that wouldn't amount to anything, and the weird, die-hard fans would play it. Wizards, this is now your main source of revenue. Stop doing this. Please, for the love of God.
Please.
Anyway, so that's partly the reason why this was Play of the Week. It's what Jacob did with this. Funnily enough, he didn't win. So this was one of the Commander games that everyone dreams of. Everyone is close to winning.
Great.
I was playing Brutaclad, funnily enough. Theo was playing Streffen. Have you played against their Streffen deck?
Is that the vampires one? The Rakdos blood one?
Yes, with blood. So when Streffen attacks, you can sacrifice 2 blood, drop a vampire that's tapped and attacking.
And it's indestructible.
Correct.
On turn. Yeah. The deck's
super cool.
Really strong
it's
too.
Bonkers. If you let Theo play this deck with you, do not let them get out of hand.
Nope.
Because
don't do it.
You will end up with a board full of vampires, and usually they've got 19 +1 counters on them for whatever reason.
Yeah, it gets out of hand.
Just don't let them do it. Anyway, awesome decks, awesome playstyles. I had some really cool synergies going on. I had my port. I can't remember what the card's called. It's a 4-mana artifact. When it ETBs, Prototype Portal, I think the name is. When it ETBs, you imprint a creature card from your hand. Then you pay X, where X is the converted mana cost of the card imprinted, and you create a token copy of that creature. You see where it's going with Brutaclad?
Yes.
It's phenomenal. So I had Wormcoil Engine under there.
What? James playing Wormcoil Engine in his Brutaclad deck? Say it ain't so!
Crazy! Anyway, it was really fun. Then I was doing some wild things with that. Then I got Desolation Twin out.
Whoa.
I was making tokens of Desolation Twin. I had some really crazy stuff going on. Theo was just literally slowly building a board. Like, Theo was playing fairly. Butters and I were like slamming combos and doing this and that and all this kind of... Theo was like, alright, drop this vampire. This one gives +1 counters whenever it deals damage. And slowly but surely, Theo's board was like 5 flyers with 18 +1 counters on them.
Oh my word.
Now, the end of the game, it was like 20 minutes for this one turn rotation because there was so much math and responding going on. Basically, what Butters had set up was this amazing kind of infinite engine with Derevi, Phyrexian Altar, and Displacer Kitten.
Oh.
And...
Okay.
And Sylvala, the one that parlays.
Okay.
So,
interesting.
Stick with me.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly, but you're probably going to have to comment how this combo specifically works. But basically, they sacked Derevi to the altar, generating a mana. But Butters had the Dictate of Karametra down, which doubled lands. So
okay. So they tap for twice as much.
Correct.
Yeah.
Bounce land, pretty good, generating a lot of mana.
Great.
When Derevi ETBs... there's an untap trigger. Derevi ETBs and can untap a target permanent.
Yeah.
So he could untap a bounce land and Sylvala and then use Displacer Kitten to flicker Derevi if he needed to get it to happen again. Correct. The other thing that was really crucial was he had an Aura Shards on field.
Oh.
Yeah,
So Aura Shards is the 1 white-green
Correct.
enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment.
Correct.
I believe. Yeah, that card's crazy good.
Yeah, and one that anyone playing Brutaclad quivers at. Like,
Yeah.
shivers. It's horrible. So, like, my board was annihilated. Like, I've really been sent back to the Stone Age because of this weird loop. Butters was digging, couldn't find the way to win, passed the turn to me. I managed to rebuild pretty effectively, but that my turn, there was a situation where I put something on the stack. Oh, I know what it was now. It was, I cast Thieving Skydiver and tried to steal the Phyrexian Altar. Because that stops
Stop the combo.
It stops the loop. This ridiculous 6-card combo loop. In response to that, Butters did a bunch of stuff. In response to that, I did a bunch of stuff. In response to that, and it just kept going and going and going. This stack was like, we let things resolve and then would respond again, and it would just like constantly shorten and grow. It was such a complicated piece of math and making sure the stack worked and all this kind of stuff. We probably made a mistake, but it was so much fun. There was so much math going on. Theo, in the meantime, there was something that was allowing them to draw a bunch of cards, right? They had a bunch of cards in hand. Both Butters and I couldn't win, so I passed the turn to Theo.
Okay.
Oh my god, we forgot about all those flying vampires. So this insane combo battle between Butters and I was very quickly brought to a halt by a lot of flying attackers. Now, it wasn't straight up Theo wins.
Okay.
There was so many pieces that Theo had to get right here, and it was actually one of those points where we were like, we're so invested in how this game works. Is there a way that Theo can win? So we all kind of looked at Theo's hand.
Tried to like brainstorm it together. Yeah, it's often like that towards the end of the game.
Yeah,
right?
and honestly, I'm glad we did, because I said, no, you can't do it. I think I've got enough blockers and Butters will win on his turn and blah, 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 blah. Exaxes.
On both of you?
On both of us.
Oh my god.
Exaxes on both of us. I can't remember the specific turn of events, but it was like a bedevil to get rid of this specific creature to stop this specific loop. A murder to destroy this. Like, literally using every single one of their resources down to the last basic land was tapped.
Wow.
All creatures must have swung. And I think one of the reasons that it got there in the end was because they had Olivia Voldaren, which brought back one vampire from the bin.
It attacked,
and it was like some dumb 2/3. It was tiny, and it was just
was
enough to get there.
Wow.
Like, I had to look through the hand, I was like, no way you can do this. You don't have enough damage. 2 damage, and then it was Exaxes.
Wow. Good stuff, Theo.
So cool. So
Nice.
shout out to A. Butters for assembling a dumb 6-card play, which was ridiculously hard to interact with, and condolences for it not winning. Shout out to Theo for actually winning the game fair and square with vampires.
Special Walt shout out to Theo for ignoring value and just bonking face. That's I'm so proud.
Yeah.
I could not be more proud. On behalf of me and the Selesnya Guild, we're proud of you.
It's so... Whoa. Selesnya player commenting a Rakdos player on fair play. What a weird thing to think about.
Look, we have more in common than you might think.
I don't want to know the things you have in common.
Well, that's just about it. We can't wait for that Q&A episode. Please get those questions in. We're going to throw this last bit of paper.
Oh my god,
okay.
that was very aggressive. I apologize.
Every bit of paper wants to attack me, apparently. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.